Party Animal Quilting. I'm Debbie Brown. Tonight I'm going to be continuing to work on this small sampler quilt. This is a sample of what I want to do on a larger quilt. So far I have done and stitched ribbon candy in a contrasting color along the spine. I have stitched feathers around the circles, which I love, and this week I want to finish the background quilting of the border. I need to make decisions on what pattern I'm going to stitch and what color and weight of thread I'm going to use. Let's party! This border I'm going to finish tonight, which is really exciting. I want to stitch down this area behind the ribbon candy and the feathers, and it's the same out here in the end of the border. And I think I want to stitch some switchback lines, just up and down curves. Now, since I have navy blue ribbon candy running here, I know I want navy blue thread color here. Now, the threads, these are the threads I've used so far in this quilt. So I have navy blue Deco Bob, which is an 80 weight polyester, really thin. I have a 50 weight confetti, which is a cotton mid-weight. This stitching was done with the 50 weight, and the bobbin was stitched with the 80 weight. So I know I'm going to want 80 weight in the bobbin. Now, do I want to stitch this background fill with a thinner thread, or will it matter? I chose to use the thinner thread, the 100 weight in Visifill, around the circles because the green was such a heavily contrasting color. But do I mind if the background quilting here, the switchbacks, are the same thread and the same thickness as this ribbon candy? So my choices are thick thread that matches or thin thread that matches. Since it doesn't matter, I'm going with the thicker thread because there's less of a chance of it breaking. I probably won't have any problem, but I'm going to use the thicker thread. Having said that, I don't know if you can see this extra fullness going on here. What I need to do before I stitch this background is I need to stitch in the ditch outside of this border. And to do that, I'm going to use my walking foot, and I am going to use that 80 weight thread because I want it to really disappear in that seam. So I'm first going to stitch in the ditch, and then I'm going to do some switchbacks along the inner border and along the cut edge of the quilt. So let me get the machine threaded and we'll get started. I am getting ready to tame this beast, this thickness. Whenever I stitch with my walking foot, I usually use a longer stitch length, like 3 millimeter. The default on my machine is 2.4 millimeter, and I'm going to leave it there. I want a little bit shorter stitch. I'm using a finer thread. I'm using that 80 weight fine navy blue in the top and in the bobbin. And I'm going to start in the corner and work my way out, and then turn the quilt and do it that way. So there will be 4 knots going on here. So there's a couple ways to position my needle here. I can position it all the way to the side and run it along the edge of my foot. I am going to work down the center. I'm going to put the center of the seam down the center of my foot where my needle is. So I'm going to position my needle down with my hand, and that looks like it's where I want it, so I'm in the right place. Let me pull up that bobbin thread. Come on. There we go. I don't know what this is. Do you ever get that long tail where you don't know where it's from, but it needs to go away? Now, since this is such a fine thread and it matches so well, I want to make sure that I'm really right inside of these seam lines, not on the green, but right inside the seam on the blue. And I'm going to try doing a machine knot without worrying about hand tying. I'm going to press that tack stitch, the tack stitch button on my machine, and let the machine do its thing, and then start quilting. I'm going to have to start leaving my quilting glasses in here because I want them again. could just cut my thread here, but I want that long tail to make to bring the thread up whenever I start the next time, so I'm going to cut the thread manually. And let's judge how I did. Ooh, I got a couple stitches into the blue right here. I'll see if I can zoom the camera in digitally when I edit this, but I've got 4 stitches on the blue, and it's such a fine thread, I'm gonna leave it because it doesn't really show. And then I can cut off all of this thread from the beginning and go do more stitch in the ditch. And here we go. So this is now stitched in place. This border is stitched in the ditch. And that way, what it's going to do is keep this seam perfectly straight, regardless of what I do over here. I won't accidentally move some of the fabric from this outer border and push that seam in a little bit and give that a little wiggle. So that's now stabilized. I'm going to put on my free motion quilting foot, and I'm going to switch to the 50 weight cotton to start doing some switchbacks in the background here. I've added my free motion quilting foot. I've threaded the machine with my 50 weight cotton in the needle, still have the 80 weight in the bobbin, and I'm getting ready to do some background quilting. What I want to do here is just bring some lines down. Since there's some wave going here and a lot of curve, I want some lines. And instead of stitching hard lines, I want to stitch switchbacks, which is a curve up, a straight line up and a curve to the left and a curve to the right. And I'm going to do that the width of my foot to help space it. And when I get to the corner here, when I do ribbon candy, I quilt to the piecing, so I would quilt all the way to where this seam line is. Wow, look at this fullness I get to work on. I am going to do a diagonal line here. And I'm going to let the quilting turn the corner at that spot. So the first thing I'm going to do is stitch this down on the outer edge. Okay, so from this line, I am going to stitch so that the back of that foot is running along that line. Actually, let me go back down here. I'll come up from the bottom. Now here's how I'm going to deal with the fullness, since there's obviously extra fullness in here. I'm going to push the fullness up so that a little bit goes in between each one of these lines. I love when you sew lint into the quilt. There we go. dealing with that extra fullness. Now, this extra fullness isn't from improper piecing or pressing or anything. It's from this is quilted really tight over here, and this isn't quilted. And when this gets quilted, it shrinks up, leaving this. That's also what happens with with a batting with loft in it. It can also distort the fabric a little. This is really just a function of all the quilting over here. So as I am quilting, I'm pulling the fabric apart to get that, to make sure there are no puckers. And again, every once in a while, just running a little fullness up into each of these horizontal lines. So I've stitched to that middle line, and here's the joy of a home machine and a smaller quilt. I'm just turning it. Oh wow, when I turned it, that looks gorgeous. I'm so happy with how this looks. It's so hard to see dark quilting on dark fabric. I will work hard to get some camera angles going. Absolutely delighted, beyond tickled. I love the thread choice, the spacing. It took up that puff here. Even if you can't see much of the quilting, you can see that this is flat and this is all puffed up. Oh, I love it when this happens. And it feels good too. Okay, back to work. So my needle is now in that diagonal line, and I'm going to stitch just a little to the right. And now back to the line. And back to the line. And that chalk line will go away easily. Oh, I am so happy every time I look up here and see that. Definitely feeling the stress by pulling this out. I'm feeling that in my arms. I am trying to figure out how I could be more pleased with this, and I'm not coming up with it. That's exactly the look I wanted. I wanted to have a different shape on here since this is all really round and flowing. And now I have this. So I'm going to repeat this in the outer border along the edge of the quilt, but I have some choices to make. And the choices are, am I going to have two curves inside the quilt, or am I going to have like the capital letter C and have it go off the edge? And I really think, because I have maybe a 1/4 inch to deal with here, that I'm going to be quilting off the edge. And the things I think about, like there's a curve on the left side and the right side here, and here I will only have a curve on the left side and I have it run off the quilt. Again, I think I can live with that, and the way the quilt has been designed, that there's really maybe a 1/4 of an inch of quiltable space here before I get to the binding area, I think that's going to be what has to be. So nothing needs to be done on here. Now on this corner, I have drawn a diagonal line because I'm going to have to do that same, the same type of quilting, which is going to get interesting because I got to figure out how to get my needle in there. And I think I might have to echo in and come out. I'll work on that and then come back down. So let's just see how this goes. Problem stitching off the quilt. Gonna try to get some images of dark quilting on a dark background, but in person it looks lovely. Let's see. That came out as I pictured it. I'm really happy. I'm not going to change a thing whenever I go to quilt the larger version. Next week, I will be focusing on that inner border. A lot of decisions to make with a contrasting border. I will see you next week on Party Animal Quilting. Hi, I'm Debbie Brown with DebbieBrownQuilts.com, and I'm inviting you to join me on a scrap quilting adventure. Go to DebbieBrownQuilts.com. Sign up for the Color Blocks Quilt Along. Each month of 2021, I will release a different scrap quilt pattern, but it's not too early to sign up now. Soon I'll be posting information on how to dig into your scraps, cut them up, and prepare for our 2021 adventure. While you're visiting DebbieBrownQuilts.com, don't forget to sign up for my newsletter so you don't miss any other quilty news.